Hello and welcome to Experiential Anatomy. Today's anatomy question live with Mary Richards. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Lizzie.
And I'm Lizzie Lasater. So Mary is streaming live from her yoga room with her two beautiful hounds, her doggies, who we will keep with us as long as possible until they become potentially rowdy, and then because they're just adorable. So today, Mary, what I'd love to talk about is a sun salutation, maybe Suryanamaskar B, the sun salutation that starts with uttanasana. That one, the sun salutation that has Virabhadrasana 1 in it. And we're streaming live onto our Experiential Anatomy private group. So if you're seeing us there, say hello, give us a like, write whatever comments or questions you have as we move through. I'll be checking that. So Mary, where do you want to start with the sun salutation? Common misconceptions, most dangerous points. What's really important for yoga teachers and practitioners to understand about this really common set of movements?
So what I'd like to talk about, what I'd like to focus on this evening is with the base, because skeletal proportions, we can never get away from our skeletal proportions. And yet, sun salutations are typically instructed. It's usually too narrow a base in regards to the feet, as well as the feet and the hands, especially for most women.
Okay, I'm finding the dogs a little distracting. Why don't we put them up, and I will just check over to Facebook and see if anybody is joining us there live. What Mary was just saying before we started, which I thought was a fascinating and beautiful idea, is that this course, Experiential Anatomy, which is an online learning adventure for yoga teachers and serious students, we're running it now, those of you who are in the course know, and we're going to run it again in the fall of 2018. If you want information about this course, definitely get on the list. Experientialanatomy.yoga is the website. But Mary, what were you saying about the three of us, you, me, and Mom, Judith Hansen Lasater?
So I was walking my girls earlier today, Britta and Kira, and I was thinking that we represent over 80 years of teaching experience and practice experience, and that it's really intergenerational, and we span so many decades, because your mom is a baby boomer, or to use her preferred term, a premillennial.
Yeah.
Gen Xer, and you're a millennial. And I think that there's such a wealth to that tree of yoga. We arise from, the same trunk, but our branches really span quite a skyscape, and our roots go deep into the earth.
Yeah, and that's something I have always treasured about yoga, is that I've heard this expression, warm hands to warm hands. So we receive yoga, we learn yoga from someone else. We're always given it as a gift, and this transfer from teacher to student, and it gives me chills to think about it. It goes back into time, and we are a link in this chain. As all of us who are teachers, we're also students. So we play. It's like we're all, if you have a child, you're a daughter and a mother.
Yes, and it's such a privilege.
Okay, so let's look at Suryanamaskar B, sun salutation. It's so complex anatomically, what's going on.
It really is, okay? Because if you think about sun salutation B, we're really going up and down, almost like an elevator. And so we're asking ourselves to be pulled down with gravity, as well as to pull ourselves up against gravity. And a lot of those movements folks are asked to do in a narrow, almost balance beam orientation. But if we hearken to lesson 1 and key pose video number 1, Bhujangasana Cobra pose, and we remember the dots exercise, the dots that Judith placed on the student's posterior, the PSIS, so that we could see the bony width. We really want to practice out of respect for our skeletal proportions, because one of the superpowers about asana is that it's the only holistic system of health that uniquely targets the joint segments. So if we start out of joint, well, then we perpetuate that through the entire sun salutation. And let's say you practice primary series, well, you know, right off the bat, you're setting yourself up out of joint.
Okay, so you're really talking about when we put the feet together in Samastitihi and we start the sun salutation, we're already sort of inside the triangle of our hip joints?
We put ourselves inside the margin of the sacroiliac, okay? And so that pushes, it causes compression for us, and then we tend to carry that throughout the entire practice. For instance, in Warrior 1, lining up heel to arch, which is too narrow for most sacrums. And
interesting. Okay, keep going, please.
And we can try that. Let me know if I need to adjust my camera. I have to get my desk chair out of the way, which is a stability ball. Okay, whoops.
We want to see your head.
Okay, so if we stand with the necks of the big toes, let me step off my mat. Necks of the big toes together and outer edges of the feet parallel, I can already feel this compression, especially in my right SI joint, because I have a leg length inequality from a hip replacement. My right leg's currently longer than my left. And then we'll carry this through. We'll try a forward fold, and you can hear that in my voice. I can't rotate over the axis of the hips as well. But if I separate my feet 2 fist widths, at least 2 fist widths, it revolutionizes the entire series of asana for me.
Okay, so is this for you a kind of rule of thumb, rule of fist, that every student, you really want almost all students? I mean, what if I'm maybe have a male pelvis and I have really narrow hips? Would my feet be together in Mary Richards' reality?
Men can get away with it more than women can just because of that rectilinear pelvis. But here's the thing. If you're following us along on Facebook, if you come to stand and you take your middle and index fingers and you go from your greater trochanter, that bony knot on the outer hip, and you then trace just along the top of the thigh, you'll come to a divot. That's your hip joint, okay? So we want to have our feet under those divots, under those wells. So for most people, it's a minimum of 2 fist widths. That's a place to start, but some of us need 3. Because what we're doing is we're using the fists to have the little fingers line up with those divots. So for me, I really need a fist and a half. And that change puts my legs right under my hip joints, right under my pelvis, which we know I'm obsessed with because I stated it on camera. It's recorded for posterity's sake.
I love that moment from the promo video for Experiential Anatomy where Mary Richards goes, Mom goes, I love Mary Richards because she says things like, and then it's cuts to Mary Richards and she says, I'm obsessed with the pelvis.
Oh, I am, because it's the most unique region of the body, especially when we look at gender, at biological gender. And so it's important that we respect our width. And not only does that make a difference when we're standing just to start the sun salutation. I mean, you can hear, here I am next to the big toes together, outer edges of the feet parallel. You can hear the change in my voice, and I can hear a breathy quality to my voice because I can't really breathe. Like I feel a stop in the excursion, the movement of my diaphragm. But when I find my base, you can hear the change.
Wow. Okay. So I'm going to take a couple notes of the key points, and then I'll share my screen in a few moments. So that's point number 1, respect the skeletal proportions. And then I'm going to put under that as this kind of sub point, feet to fists width. So what's your point number 2?
So the other thing is that base then sets us up for freedom through the transverse axis of the hips, okay? Because if I've got blocks nearby, so we know I like uttanasana with straight legs because it's a straight leg standing forward fold. Now I can easily put my hands on the mat, but I want to show you with blocks. So I put the blocks in place. If I try to do this with the necks of my big toes together and the outer edges of my feet folded, now I can do it, oh geez Louise, just because I have really cooperative hamstrings, but I don't like it. And I feel a lot of stretch in the back of my knee in a manner that I don't enjoy. It's too close to the insertion for my preference. So if I separate my feet, for me, it's about 3 fist widths, outer edge is parallel. See, it frees up the axis, and that's what I want. Because I want to hinge, I want to roll the pelvis over and around the heads of the femurs, and then come into the pose.
That's so clear. We can really see it from the side, Mary.
And see, then this sets me up for everything else. Now, a common move then we'll make is we'll inhale, and we'll lift the chest, right? Okay, I'd like us not to do that.
I'm sorry, what? Okay, so you're saying, I mean, that's what I learned in Ashtanga for years. This, what's often called Ardha uttanasana. Inhale, and you make a back bending motion, but your fingers are still touching the floor in uttanasana.
Here's the issue with that. Once we're in uttanasana, so if we're in Ardha, half, what is half of uttanasana? Well, the typical person has about 110 degrees of flexion in the hip. So that's a lot of flexion. So that means we would come to what? About 55 degrees of flexion if it were a half. So that means here we are in uttanasana, we would come here, which is fine, as long as I have a closed chain. I'm pushing my hands into my thighs and pressing my thighs into my hands, and my abdominals are engaged, supporting my low back. But if I lift here, it goes right into my lumbar hinges. Okay, and this is problematic because lumbar number 5 and S1, that's where the most flexion occurs in the entire vertebral column. So we're sending a mixed message to the vertebral column. We're saying, well, you're in hip flexion, you're in a standing forward fold, which also lumbar flexion, they are married to one another. But now we're going to come out of it. So I don't like the dichotomy it creates. I want a more consistent flow.
What I feel, interestingly, when I do that is I feel as though I'm trying to back bend at my kidneys.
Yeah, but why? But here's the thing. What's the functional intention of that, especially when we're going to eventually come to upward facing dog? So it's like, put the back bend in when you're back bending, when you're practicing an asana of extension, not flexion. Does that make sense?
I think so. So what do you do when you're practicing this on salutation? You just fold forward and then you step back to dog directly?
Yeah, so what I do is first I establish my width of base. Outer edge of the feet parallel. I inhale, I take the arms up, I turn my palms to the wall behind me. I draw my navel back and up. I think about moving my organs back and up. Okay? and then fold at the hip, not too fast, not too slow. We want to be like Goldilocks. Then I exhale and I pull my belly in even more and fold more. Get my hands down on the mat, and then I inhale and I step back and come to the top of the push-up position with my hands slightly forward of my wrists. And hopefully you can see on the camera, I've got plenty of space between my feet. I don't have the necks of my big toes together.
Yeah, your feet are not touching, like almost in a classic push-up position.
Yeah, so I've taken my legs directly back from my hips. So my bones, I stay in Tadasana. And then what that does is it allows me to recruit the muscles of my legs to help support the weight of my legs and my pelvis, which is the largest, heaviest region of the body.
Okay, so point number 2, let me just catch up on my notes here. What do you want me to say about Ardha Uttanasana? Just skip it entirely?
I would skip it. Instead of coming out of the pose, which is what Ardha Uttanasana, that's the effect it has for me. The effect Ardha Uttanasana has for me is it pulls me out of the introspection of Uttanasana. Instead, I want to go deeper into the cave of the forward fold to start calming my nervous system down.
Ooh, I like that. Okay, those of you who are on live with us on Facebook, we'd love to hear from you. Give us a comment, give us a like if you're enjoying this session, or if you have any questions specifically about this sun salutation as we move forward. So, Mary, I'm going to write down for plank, you're saying wider feet to support the pelvis?
Yeah, keep your feet hip width apart. Because see, a muscle is most effective in the plane in which it lies, okay? Doing what it does. And plank pose, if we hooked me up to a bunch of sensors and electrodes right now and put me in plank pose, we would find that I have maximal abdominal engagement, which is what we want. Because see, I'm fighting the pull of gravity. Gravity's under me, just pulling down through my body. And if I take my feet against one another, well, I've distorted my skeletal proportions in such a way that it's going to reduce my efficiency in the pose. It's going to reduce the efficiency of the muscles because I'm changing how they're lying in the plane. Yeah? You with me?
That's clear. That's clear. I just keep muting myself so that you won't hear me typing. And you won't hear, I'm in Bali and I'm outside this wall, there's motorcycles, and above this wall, there's monkeys going on the roof. So I'm like.
It's okay. I have kangaroos in the form of dogs running around my house. So,
Exactly. Okay, so what's next? What do you want to tell us? Because we want to try to keep this around 30 minutes as a digestible amount for people. So tell us a couple things we maybe won't get to everything. So we could talk about chaturanga. We could talk about upward dog. We could talk about downward dog. I definitely want to get to Virabhadrasana 1. So maybe pick one of those other things and then we'll close with Vira 1.
The thing I want everyone to remember with chaturanga is, again, width of base. Width of base, not just between your feet, but also between your hands, okay? And now we have this idea in chaturanga that the wrist goes under the shoulder. But the wrist only has a maximum of 70 degrees. This is called extension. We only have 70 degrees of extension in the wrist. So if we put our wrist directly under our shoulders, we're trying to force 90 degrees. And force doesn't work all that well.
Okay, can you move your mat halfway towards the gray one so we can see a little bit more of the mat? Yeah, a little more. Okay, that's perfect. So now can we see you do plank and with the wrist? what you're saying.
Okay, so do you notice how I've placed my hands slightly forward of my shoulders?
Yeah, it doesn't actually look vertical. It looks like a bit of a slant.
Right, so I have the back of my wrist lining up with the top of my shoulder. So I'm not like this, which I can feel my carpal tunnel squeezing just doing this with one hand down on the mat. I have my hands forward about 2 inches farther than you might expect, okay? And I also have my hands a little wider because typically we'll see folks with their hands right under their shoulders and pretty close together. But we need room for the chest to come down in the direction of the mat. So if I'm like this, you can already see what this does to my shoulders. My rotator cuff.
Yeah, and what I have heard, I think from you or mom somewhere along the way, that what we want to think about in this position is actually the width of our collarbones.
Yes, we want the collarbones to be able to spread. What they're actually doing is they're rolling outward. And that allows our shoulder girdle to get organized. Okay?
My shoulder girdle is so organized this morning.
That's what you want. You want an organized shoulder girdle because we don't want to lead with this aspect of the shoulder as we've come down into Chaturanga Dandasana. We want to make sure that our scapulae stay on our back. And as we lower, that they squeeze toward the spine and hug in. Because we're trying to push an elephant. Gravity. We're pulling ourselves through space against gravity. So by placing my hands there, see, then I can push off my feet. And I can come up, and then I actually like to walk back. Now this feels awesome to me. I've got a lot of lumbar extension. Notice the space between my feet.
Yeah, it looks wide. I mean, for the kind of yoga eye, it's wider than we're used to maybe seeing from our students.
But boy, I feel such an amazing stretch through my belly. I'll just hang out and talk to you.
You know what I've been doing there, which I love so much, I've been, since studying experiential anatomy with you and mom, I have been experimenting pretty much anytime I do a back bend on my belly, so upward dog or cobra or Dhanurasana, bow pose, I'm just putting my feet so wide and it feels so delicious. It feels like it's funny, especially when I do it at home, I don't care, no one's looking, but when I'm in a class, it sometimes feels like a guilty pleasure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. You know, guilt is an artificial emotion.
Guilt is what?
An artificial emotion.
An artificial emotion. Okay, Mary, so I want to get to, why don't I quickly share my screen with you so you can see what I've written thus far and people can see a little bit about, okay, so here's just the title. I'll make that in italics. Okay, so the sun salutation tips thus far: width of base, respect your skeletal proportions, wider base of support, feet 2/5 width. Then in Ardha Uttanasana, you talked about why do a back bend during a forward bend and skip it, snap out of it. And then in plank, I've got a couple points. Feet equals hip width, support the pelvis, wrists under the shoulders, and hands
forward of the shoulders.
Okay.
Wrists forward.
Forward of the shoulders, and hands as wide as the collarbones.
Yes.
So I will share a link to this little text file in the notes if people want to have this written down, because I think that's it's really, for some of us visual learners, it's helpful to see it. So let's go to our last movement that we're going to focus on today. There's been several questions on the course learning platform of people who are in experiential anatomy about Virabhadrasana 1. So what do you really want us to understand, or what, I mean, it's so big and broad, but what's one new thing you'd really like us to understand today?
I'd like us to embody Warrior One as a back extension. Yeah, that's right. Okay, there are a couple of reasons for that. One, it's a split foot standing asana. So the pelvis is, the right and left sides of the pelvic floor are doing different things when we have one foot forward and one foot back. Okay, so by tucking the tailbone in that posture, we're overriding the natural activation pattern of the pelvic floor, which has an impact on our core. Okay, because the pelvic floor and the transversus abdominis, which is sometimes referred to as the corset muscle, in a balanced body, they are in harmony together. So that means we need to let the pelvic floor do what it's going to do. But that doesn't mean that we just dump the pelvis onto the front thigh. We're extending up and back. Okay, so I'm going to show you what I don't like and then what I prefer. Okay, so now also something to remember is a lot of people have trouble stepping forward into the lunge, especially from downward facing dog. So for students that have difficulty stepping their feet forward, it's really useful for them to have blocks nearby, okay? So they can go from Adho Mukha, they can bring their knees down, place their hands on the blocks, that gives them more space, then step a foot forward. We gotta give people room to move, because not everyone has gliding tissues and some folks have curvier bodies. So that's just my advocacy for props. So then and the thing is, we don't want to walk a tightrope. So if I turn for a second, see, I don't want to be positioned like this, taking that back foot up. You can't even really see my back foot. See, if I do this, I'm already creating compression in my sacroiliac.
So you're not thinking of lining up your feet. It's a similar thing to the beginning in Tadasana. You're thinking of keeping the feet that width of your pelvis.
Yeah, exactly. I want to carry my anatomical reality through the entire practice. Yeah, because I'm not going to escape it anyhow. You know, wherever you go, there you are. So why fight against it? I want it to work for me.
You know, I once heard from Dr. Drew a definition of mental health is being able to handle reality on reality's terms. Yeah. So I just thought of that with you. It's like Mary Richards wants you to take anatomical reality on anatomical reality's terms.
I really do. I'm a huge fan, you know. So you can see from the front, I've got a lot of width. I'm respecting the width of my pelvis. I have my right toes curled under. Now I'm not going to think about straightening my knee, because if I do that, I'm going to push up through the knee joint. Instead, I'm going to take a little bit more weight onto the little toe side of my back foot, and I'm going to push through the heel to bring that knee into extension. Now I've got a lot of movement in the ankle, so I will turn my back foot down toward the midline of the mat and bring the body up. Not everyone can do that. It's fine to stay up on the ball of the foot, and that person will just work a little harder. Now the other thing that we'll do, I'm going to turn to the side, is we'll see this. Okay, I'm going to put my heel down because I can. I'm wide from left to right. The other thing we'll do is, you see how I'm now sliding off the shin bone? How my thigh bone is behind the vertical plane of my knee?
Yeah.
But we'll think that that's safer, right? But when the knee is bent, my knee is in its least stable position. This is when I have the least contact between the bones. So it's actually easier to press the hips down and bring the body up. It's actually easier in the long run of the asana to sit down deeper into the hips. And now the right side of my pelvis, my right leg is back. Well, it's into a back bend. And then the left side of my pelvis is looking for neutral. So I want to use that as my baseline. I don't want to tip and dump my left ASIS into my thigh, because I'm going to pay for that in the hip and the knee. I want to lift up and out of the pelvis and come in to the back extension. You can see lumbar curve, lumbar curve.
This is a back bend. Okay, I want to show you, Mary. I've just pulled this up. Let me see. I'm going to share my screen with you. I've pulled up an image of BKS Iyengar doing this pose. Can you see?
Yes.
Look at this back bend here.
Yes.
Like, this man, who we can safely assume is an expert, is not tucking his tailbone to any degree. And then if I scroll up a little bit, you see there's a bunch of different images of him doing this pose. It is a back bend.
Yeah.
That to me was a really radical idea when I started focusing on that. I heard it from Mom, and you know what happened also? It changed the pose for me in the fact that I started enjoying it a lot more.
Yes. Yes, because it puts, for me, it opens up the organs. And I really feel it stretching the fascia of my heart and lungs. Because Iyengar, in several of his books, and I've heard your mom talk about this a lot, as well as other Iyengar trained instructors, the arms are an extension of the lungs. And we're opening the chest and lifting the lungs in Warrior One. So I don't want to tuck and shut down my pelvic floor diaphragm. I want to support that lift of the lungs from my pelvic floor all the way up through the crown of my head.
Mary, this is so fantastic. I want to do two final things before we close. There's a question coming in live from Facebook. Stacy writes, how much cervical extension do you like in upward dog? So that could be your little 1 minute final close before we sign off, if you're willing.
Yeah,
but before that, I just want to do, as my last thing, I want to share my notes with everyone one last time. And let's look at Virabhadrasana 1. So I have down, this is a back bend, exclamation point. Stop tucking your tailbone. Wider base of support. And then, is this correct to what you're saying? Sit deeper in the hips to protect the front knee?
Yeah. Okay. Trust the hip access to bear the weight of the body. Okay. Don't think about your knees bearing the weight of the body. Think about your hips bearing the weight of the body.
Is the pelvis everything?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, so last closing, sometimes, like the last final little piece of chocolate you're going to give us, the last dessert taste, is talk to us for 2 minutes about the cervical spine in upward dog.
I'm going to expose my cervical region. Okay, so what we don't want to do, in my opinion, any of us, is, and I'm going to put a hand back because I don't even like to demonstrate it. So I'm just taking a little bit of the weight of my skull out. We don't want to drop the head back. We're not exposing the throat. And you can feel that if you play with it at home. Maybe you want to take your hands back to support the weight of your head. You don't want to feel your thyroid bulging out of your throat. We want to open.
Wait, you can feel your thyroid? Where is it?
Right in the center of the throat. You're going to feel a butterfly-shaped cartilage. Right in the center. You feel that?
Yeah.
That's cartilage. That's the armor plate for your cartilage. So that we're not pushing, we're not jamming that gland up against that cartilage and that cartilage up against the throat. Instead, I like us to think about the neck beginning in the center of the chest. If we think of the head, the neck, and the chest as a hot air balloon with the basket in the center of the chest and the ropes running through the neck and the head is the balloon, what we're actually doing in upward facing dog is we're elevating the basket, okay? So if we look for a second, here I am in upward facing dog. See, I don't want this. You hear my voice?
Yeah.
I don't want that. Instead, I want this. You look up through the crown of the head. So the neck continues the line. It continues the flow of energy through the vertebral column. This breaks it. Dropping the head back breaks it. It gives the illusion of active extension through the neck. And we really want active extension. So that means we lift that basket and really then support the weight of the head. So we're lifting up right through the TMJ, right through the jaw. And the gaze goes up through the crown of the head.
You know, what makes me think about is the shoulder stand chapter of the course, we say don't overflex the neck in the cervical. And I'm almost hearing you say a sort of parallel mirror is don't overextend the neck.
Yeah, and what we want to do is we want to extend the neck evenly through the 7 vertebral bodies of the neck. Okay, so the apex of extension, the highest point of extension in the neck is at C4. We don't want to bend there. It's like when we back bend, we don't want to just bend at L3, L4. We want to go from S1 all the way up through the crown of the head. And it's the same principle.
All right, Mary Richards, you are a phenom. Thank you for sharing your enthusiasm and your time with us and helping us pick apart the anatomy of asana.
So much fun, Lizzie. Thank you for enabling this madness.
Well, those of you who are in the course, Experiential Anatomy, keep learning anatomy. It is I know some people get bogged down or you might feel overwhelmed, but I know we have an enormous amount of material in the course. Just go slowly, and really the wisdom for me is to pair it with practice. So you learn something new and then you try it. It's like you go to one cooking class and you go home and try to cook that on your own, and then you go to another cooking class, as opposed to going for a week of cooking and then you don't have any sense of experiencing it in your own body.
You know, I really do believe a little yoga goes a long way. And if you have 3 minutes, take 3 minutes and play with your hand position, your foot position, and your neck position in upward facing dog.
Yeah. Okay, that's your homework.
That's your homework.
And for those of you who are not yet in our Experiential Anatomy community, please visit experientialanatomy.yoga, www.experientialanatomy.yoga. Pop your email in and you'll be in the loop about future course launches. So I am sending you a big namaste.
Namaste, Lizzie.
From the future, because I'm on the other side of the world in Bali. Thank you so much, Mary Richards. We will talk again soon.
All right. Thank you, Lizzie.
Okay. How do I end this thing?